This video is Python Chapter 7, User Input, and While Loops. This video covers Chapter 7A. Most programs are written to solve an end user's problem. To do so, you usually need to get some information from the user. For example, let's say someone wants to find out whether they're old enough to vote. If you write a program to answer this question, you need to know the user's age before you can provide an answer. The program will need to ask the user to enter or input their age. Once the program has this input, it can compare it to the voting age to determine if the user is old enough, and then report the result. In this chapter, you'll learn how to accept user input so your program can then work with it. When your program needs a name, you'll be able to prompt the user for a name. When your program needs a list of names, you'll be able to prompt the user for a series of names. To do this, you'll use the input parentheses function. You'll also learn how to keep programs running as long as users want them to, so they can enter as much information as they need to. Then, your program can work with that information. You'll use Python's while loop to keep programs running as long as certain conditions remain true. With the ability to work with user input and the ability to control how long your programs run, you'll be able to write fully interactive programs. The input parentheses function pauses your program and waits for the user to enter some text. Once Python receives the user's input, it stores it in a variable to make it convenient for you to work with. For example, this program asks the user to enter some text, then displays that message back to the user. The input function takes one argument, the prompt, or instructions, that we want to display to the user so they know what to do. In this example, when Python runs the first line, the user sees the prompt, "Tell me something, and I will repeat it back to you." The program waits while the user enters their response and continues after the user presses enter. The response is stored in the variable message. Then print message displays the input back to the user. Each time you use the input function, you should include a clear, easy to follow prompt that tells the user exactly what kind of information you're looking for. Any statement that tells the user what to enter should work. For example, please enter your name. Add a space at the end of your prompts, after the colon, and before the quotes, in this example, to separate the prompt from the user's response and to make it clear to your user where to enter their text. It's very clear right here. Sometimes you'll want to write a prompt that's longer than one line. For example, you might want to tell the user why you're asking for certain input. You can store your prompt in a variable and pass that variable to the input function. This allows you to build your prompt over several lines, then write a clean input statement. So you notice we are concatenating here, prompt, adding a new line, and so on. And then when we call the input, we're using prompt, which is that. This example shows one way to build a multi-line string. The first line stores the first part of the message in the variable prompt. In the second line, the operator plus equals takes what we had, the string that was stored in the prompt, and adds the new string on the end. The prompt now spans 2 lines, again with space after the question mark for a little bit of clarity. That was added right here, and it shows up right here. It's important to use these 2 lines when your messages get long because your user may not know to scroll beyond the window they're working in. So it's really important to concatenate, use a new line when necessary. When you use the input function, Python interprets everything the user enters as a string. Let me say that again. When you use the input function, Python interprets everything the user enters as a string. Consider the following interpreter session, which asks for the user's age. The user enters the number 21. But when we ask Python for the value of age, it returns 21. The string has those little string quotes around it. We know Python interpreted the input as a string because it has those lovely little quotes. If all you want to do is print the input, this works well. But if you try to use it as a number, add 2 to it, compare to a number, you get this error. String, integer, not compatible. We can resolve this issue by using the int function, which tells Python to treat the input as a numerical value. The int function converts a string representation of a number to a numerical representation, which we see here. We enter 21. The value converts it into an integer, and we can now compare it to the number 18 and get an accurate response to our conditional test. Of course, if we wanted to print that out, we'd have to convert it back to a string. How do you use this in an actual program? Consider a program that determines whether people are tall enough to ride a roller coaster. The program can compare height to 36 because height stores the integer version of height. And if the number is greater than or equal to 36, we tell the user they're tall enough. So, if you're expecting a number, be sure to convert it to a number before you try to use it. It's time for us to speak about this thing called a modulo. Modulo divides the number by another number, and instead of returning the answer, returns the remainder. So 5 divided by 3 is not 2, but 5 modulo 3 is 2, because 3 goes into 5 one time with 2 left over. So in this program, in this operator, it doesn't care about the division problem. It just wants to know what is left over. So when one number is divisible by another number, in the case of 6 modulo 3, we get 0. Notice it's that percent sign is what you put in the code. Why do I care? Oh, this is how I figure out if a number is even or odd. Numbers that are divisible by 2, number mod 2 equals 0. This is an even number. If it's not 0, it's going to be 1, and that means it's an odd number. So here are your assignments for 7A, 7.1, 7.2, and 7.3. You're going to be using the mod in 7.3 and your numbers 7.2 and simple input use in 7.1. Happy coding!